Hey guys, welcome back to section 2 of our calendar app in .NET Core and full calendar. So we left off just creating the basic framework for our login and for our app and adding a simple bootstrap theme. I was successfully able to push because I forgot to commit first. But everything's up there, everything looks pretty good, everything's synced up. Very good practice. Get in the habit. Every time you make an app, you just make a repository for it and start committing. So you know everything that you did. So you can go back and fix it if it breaks. So anyways, next step, section 2, let's create the models. So we're going to go ahead and build out these beautiful models that you see on your screen. We need to create the events because obviously a calendar has events like, birthday party, after work meeting, whatever, doctor's appointment, those are events. Then we have locations because, well, an event needs a location. So it might be something like this event is taking place on Microsoft Teams, or maybe this event is taking place at work or home or a friend's house or whatever the case may be. It's all good. Finally, we have application user. Now, here's where it gets tricky. We already have what's called identity user. But the problem is in order to add anything custom to that, we have to extend the functionality of the identity user. It gets tricky because you have to create a class that inherits from identity user, and then you have to start adding stuff to it. We're going to do that first because I don't want to break anything. And it's generally a good idea to get started with that first so that we make sure that it's working, and we make sure that we're actually using application user and not identity user. So there's an article in the description box below. You can check it out from Microsoft on how to go about doing that. A lot of the steps are unnecessary, so we're just going to go through some of the basic steps that are necessary and then make sure that it's working. So let's go ahead and close this bad boy down, and here's our beautiful GitHub repository with the information in there. And why don't we just run it real quick and see if it operates kind of the same. And we'll also check out the database. Make sure the database is still working, because remember, we moved it to our repository at the end of the last lesson so we could version it. You could also have saved it initially to the repository, but sometimes Visual Studio doesn't necessarily let you do that. So you gotta kind of work with these things a little bit. So let's try and log in with that throwaway email I was working with. Looks great. Looks great. So everything's synced up nicely. The transition went very well. Go ahead and close this down. And let's get started with the first model, which is going to be the user. Now, as I was saying, in order to make this work, we need to create our application user. So we're going to add it to the models folder because I feel like that makes the most amount of sense. We're going to right-click models, click new item, and we're going to click class. I'm going to call it application user. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it user. You can call it just something that implies it's a user, right? So, and we're going to have this inherit from IdentityUser. So for those that don't understand inheritance means it's getting the traits from that. Ta-da! And we have to make sure we add this reference up here, otherwise it doesn't work. And now we save that. That looks good. Now, let me look over my documentation here, make sure I'm doing this right, because I have this article from Microsoft opened. I want to make sure I'm doing this right, boy. You don't want to mess this up. Ooh, no, you don't. Oh, yeah. That looks great. That looks amazing. Yep. All right, folks. So next up, come over to our application DB context. Grab this. See how it says identity DB context? We're going to go like this. Add the generic and put application user in there. And it says I can't find it, so you reference wherever you placed it. In this case, it's .NET Core Calendar.models. Now, this application DB context contains application users in it rather than regular users. Then I'm also going to add this line of code from the Microsoft article to add the onModel creating method, which we're not going to use at the moment, but we'll keep it there so that we can customize it later. This is just something we can add. We can add custom relational data in here if we're not able to reference it properly within Entity Framework Core. So we can go, oh, I don't know how to create that one-to-one optional relationship within the model itself and then scaffold it to the database. It's like, well, you can add it into this method, and I'll show you how to do that. You can use Fluent syntax to add some methods in here that will allow you to create your relational databases. And of course, we're doing code first because I have standards, okay? If you do database first, maybe you should just get off my channel. Anyways, so we're adding that because this is just the default. We're not doing anything with it now, but we're going to keep that there later. We're going to keep it there later so that we can go ahead and run with it. Now let's go into startup.cs because we have to come in here and we have to see where it says add default identity. Now we got to change this to application user. So application user, and it's going to say, I've never heard of an application user. And you go say, okay, well, you need it from .NET Core Calendar.models. Obviously, we need this reference up here because that's where we put our application user, obviously. And because it inherits from identity user, .NET Core accepts it. Let me check the documentation to make sure we didn't miss any steps here, folks. Oh, let me check on my other screen here. What do we got? Are we missing anything? Let me see. Well, looks pretty good. Looks pretty good. Now, we're going to get an error here when we try to log in. The reason why is because by default, ASP.NET will try to use the identity user within whatever it scaffolds. And you got to tell it, no, we're not using identity user, we're using application user. This is actually something I like better about ASP.NET than .NET Core, was the fact that you could add this stuff in a little bit easier. It was right there, and everything was explicitly laid out. So you would have your application user. Yep, see, there's the error. Yeah, you're going to get this every time. You're going to get this every time. The reason is because we're referencing a user manager that contains identity user. And since we updated this code here, it's not registered as a service within .NET Core. So it's going to throw that error every single time. Just expect it and act accordingly. If you Google search it, it references, the Stack Overflow question actually references the article I'm looking at right now, which has the solution right, where is it? Where is it? Right here. This right here is the solution. We have to change all this out to this. Right? Or what's going to work based on what we have referenced here. There's a problem. Remember the last lesson, we created our identity areas, right? So we have this area, identity, pages. Oh, it's empty because it's using the default. The default, as I said, contains the user manager of identity user. We got to update that. So now's a really great time for us to go in and start and create those views to make sure we can log in because we just broke our application. So let's right click on pages and let's click add. Let's click new scaffolded item. Let's go identity. Click add. So there are 4 pages that I always like to add to any app, which are login, register, forgot password, and log out. There's a bunch more too you can use, like stuff for 2-factor authentication, stuff for single sign-on. Oh no. Looks like we need to add a package in order for it to work. You might get that error. That's weird because usually it's installed by default. So let's go into our NuGet package, because again, you might get this error. So we'll go ahead and go through this. It said there's a package called design that you need. Let's see if it's installed. Like Entity Framework Core. Okay, it's installed. Looks like we've got the latest. That's bizarre. Why don't we do a quick restart here? Shall we do a quick restart and see if that fixes it? Turn it off and back on again and see if that fixes it. If not, I'll just cancel this whole damn... YouTube series. I don't give a damn. All right, so let's try again. Because it's asking for a NuGet package that is there. You guys saw it. I saw it. The machine is wrong. I'm the one that's right. I know what's going on. You're stupid, Visual Studio. But again, you got to run into these things when you write code. Writing code is just stuff breaks, and then you go, okay, well, it broke. How do we fix it? As you go along, everything just keeps breaking in different ways. It's not giving us the option for scaffolded item. It's not giving us the option for scaffolded item. I have a true. I'm about to call Microsoft right now. Why does it not like it? Okay, there it goes. It's just loading. Yeah, give it a second, I guess. Let's go new scaffolded item. Go identity. This looks promising. Yeah, because typically it's going to install that stuff for you because you're going to need it. Like, why would you not want to add, why would you not want to add stuff? So we'll do the same thing I was talking about. We'll do login, logout, confirm email, forgot password. Not confirm email. We probably don't really need that. And we'll go reset No, well, we'll do register. We can add reset password and confirm email later. We have to add a data context class, which is going to be this. And being that we added UserManager of type ApplicationUser, it might automatically update this once it does the DB context, because the DB context inherits from identity DB context of type ApplicationUser. So this one might fix itself, folks. Let's stay tuned and see. Let's see if .NET Core is smart enough to do that on its own. Okay, let's see. What do we got? Ooh, that's very nice. Did it figure it out? Let's look in the C# code. Boom, look at that, folks. Look at that. Isn't that fantastic? It knows. It's smart. It knows we're using ApplicationUser and not IdentityUser, like the default setting is. So if you update your service class or your DB context before you do the scaffolding of the login views, everything is easier. Because otherwise, we got to refactor all these identity users and refactor all of them to application users. So that's a pain in the ass, but you know. Ooh, but we're still getting the error. I know what's going on. It's the same thing we looked at in that article. Remember this? Login partial, right? Login partial.cshtml. Come down over here. Let's go to shared, where we have all these shared fields. And look, this is using identity user. We got to get rid of this. See that? Got to get rid of it. We can't do it. It's not allowed. Try again. Again, you're going to get that error every time when you work with .NET Core. It's stupid. But life goes on. Ta-da, beautiful. Looks great. Looks great. Looks amazing. Yeah, and then if we go over here and we go register, we can say, so this is just default stuff. We can go into our register view and we can now customize this. I know this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with building the models, but as soon as you build a model for your application user, you want to make sure you update your views so that it's using the correct references. Otherwise, it all breaks. So you got to watch out. So we're going to do this as a necessary step to updating the application user. The next step is going to be building out our other models. So we go to register.cshtml, create a new account for the calendar app. We save that. We come over here and we hit refresh. That should update. Oh, there it is. So now we have full control. We got full control. This is amazing, right? This looks great. Go ahead and close that down. Why don't we version that while we're at it? Come over here into our source tree, and let's version this. So we're going to go stage all, and I really should git ignore some of these DLL files, but because if you see these aren't actual updates. It just keeps versioning it because I don't know that Git necessarily knows how to recognize whether or not it's been changed. These are files that have been changed. You know, this login file was added. You know, but these DLL files, they need to be git ignored. But I'm kind of lazy, so I haven't done that yet. But let's just add some notes on the important updates. So, add application user model and corresponding login and register views. Doesn't that look great? Doesn't that look amazing? Let's go ahead and commit. And we'll push to the master branch. Pushing right to master because, hey, that's my project. I'll do what I want. Don't tell me I can't push right to master. Don't tell me I can't break it in production. There is no production. I am production. Awesome. That looks great. Let's go back here. For some reason, I can't see my toolbar. Oh, there it is. All right, that looks fantastic. That was fantastic. So let's keep going. Let's keep going. We got to finish up this section. We're going to build out our models. And obviously, we're going to use the models folder. So basically, there's 2 steps to building out a model. You add the model to your models folder, and then you add a DB set in your application DB context. Those are the 2 steps. And then in some situations with certain relationship types, if your entities are related, which obviously they should be, there should be you might need to update that on model creating method in order to add, say, like a one-to-one optional. I think it's one you need to add via Fluent syntax. Most relationships, like one-to-many, you can basically add within your model itself. So you shouldn't need to be like, hey, let me add it to my on model creating. But we'll go into that in a second. So for those of you that don't understand basics of the basics of relational databases, it's like one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many, one-to-one optional, one-to-one required. There's like five or six major ones that people use all the time, and then I just go from there. All right, so let's create our first model. What are we going to create first? We're going to create events called event. Ta-da! So think of this like writing SQL. So when you write SQL, you need what? Primary key, you need like a name, whatever. So we're going to go through, let's bring up our presentation again and see what we got here. So we got ID, name, description, start time, end time, and location. That looks great. That'll give us plenty of information. However, we're going to need to add the location model before we can reference it. And I'll show you how to do that. So public int ID, get set. Now we can also add this here, this attribute here, to indicate to .NET Core that is in fact an ID. Right? So now .NET Core understands it. Usually it can infer if you have something named ID, it'll infer that that's the primary key, but we'll just make sure. Then we go public string name, get set. Just follow along. Public string description, get set. Public date time, start time, get set. Public date time, end time, get set. So for those of you who don't understand what this is just a basic syntax for a plain old C# object. This is what it looks like. You got your getter, setter. This is public, meaning you can access this anywhere. So you can also do something like this. You can go private set, and now it has the access modifier of private. So only the class itself can modify the name. And that could be for a lot of reasons. You might have some rules that the class has access to that define what the rules are for setting the name value. But for a simple project like this, we're fine with having public getters and setters on all of our fields. You know, for a simple project, because there's not a lot of business rules here, so we don't need to really account for things like that. All right, next up. What do we got next? Well, let's create our location model. This one's going to be even easier. We'll just call it location, obviously. And we'll do the same thing. We'll use an int value as the ID, and we'll set that as the key. We have to add a reference to data annotations here. Like so, system.componentModel.data annotations. And then what were the things we added? So locations, we'll have ID, name, and locations. That's what we agreed on in our design document, which if you don't have a design document before you build an app, you're going to have a bad time. Like a to-do list, but for an app. Great idea to have one. Okay, that's it for the basic data. Now we need to add the relational data. So let's comment this, relational data. And what this is this shows the relationships between our objects. Right? So how would event relate to location? Well, an event can only take place in one location, theoretically. So the relationship from event to location is 1. But a location could theoretically have many events. You could have a meeting room that has 5 or 10 different events in a given day or week. So it seems like it's 1 to many, the 1 being the location, the many being the events. That makes the most amount of sense to me. I don't know if that makes the most amount of sense to you guys, but we're going to do 1 to many. So we're going to write out this virtual location. We'll name it location, get set, like that. And if we can see here, this goes into our what we just made. Since it's in the same folder, it has access to it implicitly. We don't need to add a reference. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to go, okay, cool. comment this out so we know it's or we can also create it as like a section. We'll go public virtual I collection, which is what we use to indicate the many. Boom, like so. And again, I've got lots of good documents in the description box. You can go over this yourselves and learn more about it. This is how we do it code first for one-to-many, which is very basic, and .NET Core can figure it out without having to use any type of fluent syntax in our on-model creating method, which is good because it does get a little messy when we start doing that. You know, once you have to start using on-model creating, bro, gets a little tricky. That's all I'm saying. All right, so that looks good, and we have the get set public because we are going to want to get and set them when we're accessing these models. Now, one last step, we go into our application DB context, and we go like so. There it is. Because the application DB context needs a list of these. And we use a DB set for a list. We can also define different rules in our options for our DB context. Like we want to use lazy loading, which is really good, or eager loading, some type of loading where related entities are loaded with the base entity. It can be very useful. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But this is just going to be the basic event right here. So what are we going to do? We're going to go into our package manager console. We're going to go add migration. We're going to call it events locations. And let's take a look at what this generates. This should generate relational data. Because again, the I collection implies a relationship. Let's see. Yeah, that looks really good. Events is going to have a foreign key for locations. Locations should not have a foreign key. Yep. That's how one-to-many works. That looks beautiful. That looks really good. So quick explanation about these. These are called migrations. These run on the database to update it. And you have two methods in here. You have an up and a down. The up is what runs when we migrate the database. The down is what runs when we revert that migration. We go back. So if we want to go back, this runs. If we want to go forward, this runs. So let's go forward. Let's go update database. Let's see what happens. Okay. Let's check her out, shall we? Let's see what we got on that good old SQL server in our local machine. This, I believe, is our database because I have so many databases in here. Sometimes I don't know what the hell I'm looking at. And you can see here events. Yep. Events should have a column location ID, which is a foreign key. Absolutely. ID, which is a primary key. So that looks great. And then if we go into locations, we see the same thing. So the one does not reference the many. The many references the one in one-to-many, right? So we got a foreign key in here for the many, which is the events. You can have many events in one location, but we don't have a foreign key here because it's not needed. All right, it's not needed. Now, it gets a little different when you do other relationships, but it's all kind of the same concept, right? All the same concept. All the same basic concept of how databases relate to one another. So let's go ahead and version that. Come on over here. Version. git commit. Check it out. Events and locations and db context. Oh, no. It's to db context. That's all we did. So we'll go commit, and we'll push right to the master because we just like to live dangerously around here. Push right to master and deploy right to production. That's how we do it around here. Just kidding. Don't do that ever. Okay. Especially if you work, if you work with a lot of other people. Okay, that looks absolutely amazing. What's next? Well, based on our project requirements, we want the user to be able to log in and view their events. Right? So I'm a user. I create an account on this app. I create my events, and then I want to look at my calendar because I've scheduled events. What are my events? What do I have coming up? Can you show me my calendar on this web app? Sure. Of course we can. And we will. But in order to show you your events, there has to be a relationship between user and event. Or in this case, application user, because that's what we called it. So let's go ahead and grab this thing. This is in the database. If we add a field here, it's going to update that ASP.NET user field, right? So how do we do this? How do we tell Entity Framework to relate user to events? Well, same way we did it before. Public virtual I collection. Ta-da! And then we need to add the corresponding public virtual to the event, because the event is the many, the user and the location are the one, right? Virtual application user get set. Let's do that. Yeah, that looks good. That looks really good. So why don't we go ahead and try that and see if that works. Oh, no, we don't need to add a DB set. So let's go add migration user events. Build started. Watch this come out empty. Ah, no, it didn't. Thank God. Okay. Phew. I get nervous sometimes when I generate migrations. I've had a lot of bad migrations over the years. That's actually probably the easiest way to break your whole project, is just to mess up the migrations, and then you mess up the database, and then you mess up the code, and the database isn't versioned, so you can't really go back that easily. Yeah, gets crazy. So here we are. This looks really, really good. So foreign key, ASP.NET users, user ID. Let me see. Yeah, that looks really, really, really good. Yeah, it looks like the only column we're adding is the user ID and events, which I believe is correct. So we go update add a base. It'll run that up function method, whatever we call it in C#. And then let's come over here. Let's go into columns. Oh, yeah, there's nothing there. There shouldn't be. But let's go into events. Go ahead and refresh. Yep. FK, foreign key. That looks amazing. That looks really good, guys. Our models are coming along so nicely and so cleanly. So why don't we go ahead and version that so that we have a good track record. We'll go stage all. Yeah. Let's go add relationship between user and events one to many, like so. And it'll add the migration that we have, and it will add the new relationship in the code so that once we have our DB context, we're good to go. All right. But I mean, that looks solid, guys. That looks really, really good. I think we're going to wrap up this section here. Let's check back on our list of items. We got the events, we got the locations, we got the application user, and we got all the relational data between them. I think that about wraps it up for section 2. I'll see you guys in section 3.